Welcome to the virtual workshop for the 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program, otherwise known as the UPWP. My name is Jody Bennix. I'm a program manager at Genesee Transportation Council, and I manage the UPWP process. This presentation will provide an overview of that application process. So information related to the 2022 to 2023 UPWP process will be available on publicinput.com/GTC UPWP. Here you will find the call for project partnerships document. This document goes into detailed explanation of the process of the UPWP, gives you example project ideas, it gives a detailed schedule. So all the information that will be presented on the workshop today is also available in the call for project partnerships document. You will also find the application form. These two PDFs can be found in the document section on the bottom of the publicinput.com page. What is the Genesee Transportation Council, otherwise known as GTC? GTC is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the 9-county Genesee Finger Lakes region. GTC is responsible for federally funded transportation policy, planning, and investment decision-making as it pertains to the surface transportation system. GTC is a policy board made up of elected representatives from local, state, and federal governments, along with transportation agencies. As a policy-making agency, it is important to note that GTC does not own or operate any transportation facilities. This is the 9-county Genesee Finger Lakes region. The region is made up of about 200 municipalities, all GTC member agencies. By square mile, the region is larger than 2 states. All federally funded transportation planning and investment decisions for the region are guided by the cooperative planning efforts at GTC. GTC is responsible for 3 major work products, including the UPWP, the Long Range Plan, or LRTP, the UPWP, and the Transportation Improvement Program, known as the TIP. The LRTP sets the strategic direction for all GTC's actions and programs, and this is updated every 5 years. GTC just adopted a new LRTP for 2045 this past June. The policies in the LRTP are then further refined in the UPWP through individual planning studies. GTC updates the UPWP every year. And finally, the TIP is a capital program that funds improvements to the transportation infrastructure, such as the road resurfacing or bridge reconstruction. Personally, I like to think of the LRTP as the umbrella that covers the entire organization. Everything that GTC does has to follow the framework set forth in the LRTP. This is true of all the UPWP activities as well. All proposed projects must support the long-range transportation plan. At its most basic level, the UPWP is GTC's operating plan and annual budget. The UPWP document lists all the federally funded transportation planning activities that GTC, its member agencies, and other municipalities in the 9-county Genesee Finger Lakes region will undertake during the next fiscal year. Activities that are proposed and ultimately funded must be consistent with the long-range transportation plan. And just to note too, the UPWP primarily supports concept-level planning, analysis, and design activities. The transportation planning funds cannot be used for property acquisition, site preparation, preliminary engineering, detailed design, ongoing operations and management fees, or construction. If you read the call for project partnerships that's available on the publicinput.com page, this goes into further detail about what types of activities are eligible, what's not eligible. I'd highly recommend reading the call, especially if you're new to the process. So what types of projects are eligible to be funded through the UPWP? As I mentioned before, the UPWP primarily focuses on concept-level planning and design projects. These can be related to infrastructure, such as bicycle and pedestrian plans, trail projects, street connectivity, access management projects, transit-supported development projects. It can be services and programs, such as public transportation. It can be integrated transportation and land use projects. GTC funds a lot of corridor studies. We also do a lot of what we call our CAP studies, which is circulation, accessibility, and parking. These usually are taking place in downtown areas where there's a high demand for parking. In the call for project partnerships, there is example project types listed. There's all different kinds of projects in there, and there's also a listing of recently funded projects in the back of the call for project partnerships. If you have any questions whether or not your idea is eligible for this federal transportation planning funding, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm going to give you some variety of ways to get a hold of me at the end of the presentation, but please reach out to GTC. We can vet your idea before you go through the application process. So regarding eligible study areas and applicants, the Federal Transportation Planning Funding is meant to support transportation planning activities in the 9-county Genesee Finger Lakes region. GTC has funded studies that have comprised of all of the 9 counties. In past years, several municipalities have joined together to fund a corridor study, especially if their issues along the corridor are similar. The projects can cover an entire city, town, or village, or they can just cover part of a municipality, such as a downtown or just a neighborhood. And who is eligible to apply? Any city, town, or village in the region, so all the municipalities in the 9-county region, as well as any GTC member agencies, these that are not municipalities, which an example would be New York State Department of Transportation or the transit provider, our GRTA. Not-for-profit and private entities could apply for the funding, but in order to apply, you need the sponsorship of a municipality or a GTC member agency. So in the past, for example, we've had Common Ground Health, which used to be known as Finger Lakes Health Systems Agency, come in for a project to do a health impact assessment, and they got the sponsorship of the City of Rochester. So if you are a non-for-profit or private entity that's interested in applying for funding, we just ask that you have a sponsorship of a municipality or a member agency. And if you have additional questions about that, that's something that I'd be happy to answer as well. So regarding the project proposal requirements, the call for project partnerships goes into greater detail about these, but I'll just touch on a few right now. We require a minimum of 10% of a contribution to your total project budget. We do encourage people to provide more than the minimum 10%. Obviously, if there's a year where we do have a lot of applications come through and funding is tight and we're not going to have enough money to fund everybody, the projects that do have that higher match do tend to stand out in those years. This match can be in the form of cash, which can be used to help pay a consultant contract. It can be in kind or a combination. I always tell folks, always put in kind down. You're going to spend time working with your GTC project liaison on your project. You're going to spend time at steering committee meetings. You're probably going to spend a lot of time talking to your constituents and your boards about your project idea. So get credit for it. Definitely put in kind down. We expect that projects will be completed within 2 years of commencement. If satisfactory progress is not made, we may seek to recapture those funds. That almost never happens. Most people are able to make progress, but every now and then there's a project that just keeps getting stalled out. So if you are having trouble with your project, if you do get funding, please let us know. We'll try to work with you to keep things moving. We also require public participation for projects that result in recommendations to the transportation system. So if you're going to propose new street design, new zoning, anything that's going to alter the landscape of the area in which you're working in, we do require public participation for those. Due to COVID, I know traditional public participation methods are challenging right now. We've had a lot of success doing some new outreach methods, virtual events such as this virtual video on the workshop that we normally have in person. So we will be flexible with that and how that's conducted, but we do require that all projects that are planning related do hold 2 public participation sessions, one at the beginning of the project to seek input just on the needs, issues, opportunities. Nobody knows their municipality or their, the project area better than the folks that live there. And then another participation opportunity at the end of the project to comment on draft recommendations before they're finalized. If you have a data collection project that's more technical in nature, then we don't require public participation because there's not going to be recommendations made that directly will impact folks. So an initial review of proposals is conducted by the UPWP Development Committee, known as the UDC. The UDC is made up of representatives from the Rochester Metropolitan Planning Area counties that are Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, and Wayne, the City of Rochester, the New York State Department of Transportation, the Rochester Genesee Regional Transportation Authority, or GRTA, also known as RTS, which is the Transit Service Provider, and the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. So some folks really get hung up on the scoring, and I always tell people not to stress out about it too much. It's a baseline of where we start evaluating the projects that are going to receive funding. GTC, we really try to focus on the need of your project, like how did you come to decide this project is even needed? Is this something that's come up in the community multiple times? Is the community supportive of this? Are there indicators that the community is going to be on board with your project idea? Do you just need a little bit of transportation planning funds to kind of take the next step and really, see this project idea through? And then the other thing we really focus on is implementation. What's the commitment from the community to implement the project? That really weighs in heavily when we're selecting projects. This slide explains the schedule for the UPWP process. The call for project partnerships is already out. The application workshop video is on publicinput.com. And we're also holding 2 virtual sessions. I've reserved the afternoons of September 21st and September 28th to talk with project sponsors. If these times do not work with your schedule, please reach out to me directly. We are happy to accommodate. Most importantly, proposals are due Friday, October 15th at 4 p.m. The UDC will review proposals throughout November and December. The draft UPWP, including the new projects, will be presented to our planning committee early January for their approval. Once the planning committee approves, it will go out for a 30-day public review. After that, the planning committee will consider any public comments, make any adjustments to the new projects, and the final UPWP is adopted by our board in February. And as always, the new UPWP starts at the start of the federal fiscal year, which is April 1st. So there's several important considerations to keep in mind. First of all, GTC is going to hold the contract for non-member agencies. So if you are a small village, a smaller municipality, or you just have a lot going on and you don't want to hold the contract for consultant services, GTC is more than happy to take over the admin work for you. We can carry out the contracting procedures through our agency. It really takes the lift off the project sponsor, which is great, especially if you're a small municipality that don't have a lot of support staff. The funds are provided on a reimbursement basis. So if you are holding your contract, you have to pay the consultant before you can get reimbursed. So you have to kind of front load the money and then GTC will pay you back. And we also need an agreement of how to pay a cash match if that's what you're doing. Again, that 10% match that's required. We need to have an agreement of how that's going to be paid to GTC before a contract is signed, because cash is extra money for your contract and GTC only has so much funding, so we need to guarantee that any cash you are proposing we have before we can go forward with the contract. We also require quarterly supports that must be submitted to us. This is just required, one of our requirements as an MPO. We need to report to our federal funding partners what we're doing per quarter, and we need to know what's going on with your project. So we'll have somebody that reaches out to you, that sends you a form, and you can just fill out the activity for the quarter. Continuing with the important considerations, if you receive funding, GTC will reach out and assign a GTC program manager to assist you throughout the UPWP process. Your first step will then be to work with your staff liaison and develop your scope of work. The scope of work will be based on your project application. It will build off of that. The next step in the process is to go out for professional services, to hire a consultant to complete your project. Your staff liaison will also work with you to complete a request for proposals or qualifications-based solicitation. It's important to note that GTC uses a qualifications-based procurement process. This helps ensure that all federal guidelines regarding the use of the transportation planning funding will be met. The project budgets are clearly stated in the UPWP, in the scope of work, and in the RFP or RFQ. Therefore, pricing is not a factor during the consultant selection process. Additionally, all projects are required to have an executive summary that can then be presented to the GTC board. The GTC board adopts this executive summary as evidence of completion of the project. Your municipality is also welcome to formally accept the plan or study, but that is not required by GTC. So in conclusion, again, all things related to the UPWP will be on the publicinput.com/GTC UPWP page. Here you will find the call for project partnerships and the application in the documents section on the bottom of this page. Again, my name is Jody Bennix. I'm here to help everybody with their applications, so please do not hesitate to reach out to GTC. My email is on the publicinput.com page in several locations, and it's jbinix@gtcmpo.org. So again, if you have any questions about the UPWP process, please reach out to GTC. If the afternoons of September 21st and 28th do not work in your schedule, that's okay. Just reach out to me. I'll figure something out. Again, we're here to help, and good luck. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's applications.